Hi everyone. So I'd like to take a few minutes today to talk with you a little bit about Mary Shelley. So Mary Shelley was born Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin on August 30th, 1797 in London. She had two very famous parents. Mary Shelley's father, William Godwin, was the founder of philosophical anarchism. He argued that government is a corrupting force in society and that it perpetuates dependence and ignorance. He believed that government would become increasingly unnecessary and powerless by the spread of knowledge and the expansion of human understanding. He was also a novelist, and his book, Caleb Williams, is amazing. Mary Shelley's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, was the author of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which was published in 1792. In this book, which is one of the most famous feminist texts of all time, Wollstonecraft argues that women should be educated so that they could be better wives and mothers. At the time, these ideas were scandalous. So in November 1812, when Mary was 15 years old, she met this guy, Percy Bysshe Shelley. He would eventually become her husband and her true love. The only problem was that he was married at the time. So they met this first time, and then they didn't see one another again for 2 years. And then in 1814, they met that second time, fell in love, and then in July of that same year, they ran off to France. Percy was still married. Mary's father obviously did not approve of the relationship and was so upset about it that he actually refused to have contact with Mary for about 2 years. During this time period, Percy's first wife committed suicide, and then being free of that, Percy and Mary went ahead and got married in December 1816. That was in London. At this point, Mary reconciled with her father, excuse me, and Mary and Percy remained married until Percy's death in 1822. They were only married for 6 years. They did have 4 children, but only one actually survived into adulthood. During the summer of 1816, which was just a few months before they got married, they left England and went on a trip to Switzerland with some friends. Unfortunately, it rained almost the whole time, and so in order to pass the time, they read ghost stories. One of their friends, named Lord Byron, who was a very famous writer in his own right, suggested that they write ghost stories. Although the others eventually lost interest in the project when the sun came out, Mary Shelley became engrossed with it. Percy encouraged her to develop her story, and that novel turned into Frankenstein. When the book was published in 1818, it was published anonymously because it was the 19th century. People assumed that the author of Frankenstein was a man. Rumors circulated that the book was written by Percy, and some scholars, even into the 20th century, had a hard time accepting that Mary Shelley was actually the author. Reviews for Frankenstein were mixed. Some praised it, while others were scandalized by the morbid content of the book. One reviewer, who I think was Percy, called it one of the most original and complete productions of the day. Another said didn't like it quite as much and said, "What a tissue of horrible and disgusting absurdity this work represents." Still another said that we are shocked at the idea of the event on which the fiction is founded. Many parts of it are strikingly good, and the description of the scenery is excellent. Another said, "For my own part, I confess that my interest in the book is entirely on the side of the monster. The poor monster always touched me to the heart, and I'm curious to hear what your reviews of the book will be, and what you think of the monster and who the monster is." Finally, probably the worst review, perhaps the foulest toadstool that has yet sprung from the reeking dunghill of present times. So, in 1831, here is the frontispiece of that edition. The book that we will be reading, or the edition that we will be reading, is the 1818 edition, the original. And that's because the 1831 edition had major revisions to it. The plot was the same, but there were so many changes to character development and things like that that it really does change the meaning of the book. The 1818 edition is the one that scholars prefer. It's the book that her readers first experience, and it represents her original intention for the story. So for many people, we get our ideas of Frankenstein from movies. And here are just a few samples of some of the different movies out there. The very first film version appeared in 1910. Is a silent movie that ran for about 16 minutes, and you can actually watch it on YouTube. The quality is terrible, but it's kind of cool to see that. The most iconic version of the movie appeared in 1831. This is the movie that gave us the bolts in the neck kind of idea of the monster that still exists today. Since then, we've had The Bride of Frankenstein, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and even Alvin and the Chipmunks meet Frankenstein. But none of these movies are actually true to the story. The closest one that appears, the closest movie, let's see, the movie that comes closest to the true story is the 1999 version called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It stars Robert De Niro as the creature. But this version too is somewhat problematic because it includes some details and some plot shifts that just aren't in the book. A more contemporary version is this, Victor Frankenstein, starring Daniel Radcliffe. But that too, if you're looking for an authentic version of the story or an authentic retelling of the story, the movie is a disaster. On February 1st, 1851, Mary Shelley died of a brain tumor. She was 53 years old. Upon her death, her son and his wife decided to have the remains of her parents moved to St. Peter's Churchyard in Bournemouth, which is a town about 2 hours south of London. Mary Shelley was buried there alongside her parents. Percy's remains are in Protestant cemetery in Rome, so the couple is not buried together. So here's a final picture of Mary Shelley. And I just want to close by saying that even though Frankenstein is a book that was published more than 200 years ago, it's still considered one of the most important novels of our time. It's been adapted endless times for various movies and TV shows and things like that, stories that have been adapted and retellings of the story. And then the themes too, with its questions about God, evil, the acquisition of knowledge, and the use and abuse of knowledge. It's a story that is surely going to be with us for another 200 years.